Are you just starting out in your software development career and you're trying to decide, should I be a software developer for a company or maybe go into consulting in software? Or maybe you've been a software developer for a long time at an existing product company and you're entertaining the thought of going into consulting. Well, stay tuned because today we're going to talk about being a software developer versus a consultant and what might be better for you in your career. Hi, I'm Jamie Edwards, and I help leaders of software development teams and software companies to do a better job releasing their software, understanding what their customers want, and having an environment where people can be as creative and innovative as possible. Today we're going to talk about the trade-offs between going into software development at a software product company versus being a software consultant. Now, I've got a lot of experience with this. I've been doing software development for about 21 years, and the first 10 years of my career were for product development companies as an employee. After that, I went into consulting and really learned a lot about that side of the business. And so I hope this video today can share with you some of the things I've learned to help you make a decision that might make your career more fulfilling for what you're really looking for right now. So the first thing to talk about is influence. How much influence do you have on your projects, your company, and maybe the technology that people use? Things like software processes, specific toolkits and frameworks. Well, as a developer at a product company, being an employee of that company, it usually depends on your title or your position. So if you come into a company as, let's say, a junior developer, depending on the culture of that company, people will be somewhat receptive to your ideas, especially if it's a startup or a smaller company. But at a larger company, oftentimes people with, bigger titles or names are kind of looked up to as the people that make those kinds of decisions, and it can be a little more difficult to get influence. Now, as a consultant, it's more often that the influence that you have may be a little bit higher. You may have more influence than a product developer when you come into a company, but it really depends on why you're there. Usually when a company is hiring a software consultant, they're not really thrilled about it per se. It's usually because there's something at that company that they figured out, we can't do this ourselves, and so we are going to hire a consultant. Well, sometimes companies hire consultants and the consultant shows up and they boss them around and tell them what to do, and they're not very receptive to their input. It's a little silly. The whole reason they're there is because they figured out they can't do it themselves. But there's other companies that are very receptive to software consultants. They're more humble, and hiring someone and bringing them in for their skills, they're figuring, I'm probably paying a lot of money per hour for this person, so I might as well listen to what they have to say. So as a consultant, at least the potential exists. You can have quite a bit more influence than a product developer. The next thing to talk about is, how does the business perceive you, whether you're a software developer at a software company versus a consultant? Well, most businesses have two different ways of treating software development. If software development is creating value for a company, and with the investment they make in development, they're able to offer new products and services that make money, software developers can be looked at as a profit center. Each person is helping generate revenue and hopefully resulting in a good business model, profit for the company. Now, in a company instead where their main product is something that has nothing to do maybe with software development, or maybe the software developers that they hire and employ are really there to kind of keep the lights on and help manage and control and keep things running smoothly, but they're not actually adding direct value. Instead, those software developers can be looked at by the business as a cost center. They really cost something that the business wishes they didn't even have to pay for, and often those businesses are going to look at you as a software developer as your overhead. So whatever we can do to reduce how much we either have to pay you or maximize your output, that's often what they're focused on. As a consultant, when you come in, the business is usually looking at you as a provider of a solution. You're there to solve a problem. You're there to either show them the way to do something, or more often you're brought in because nobody can figure out how to do a certain thing, or they've maybe even hired another consulting firm before. This happened to me oftentimes, that just failed, didn't do a good job, and they're like, we need someone who can come in and just get this done. Solve this problem for us. So the business is typically looking at a consultant as, this is not somebody I'm going to keep on full time. This is somebody I'm going to pay temporarily, and I may even have to pay more than my own people, but once they get me through this issue I have or this problem, then I'll be able to maintain it, with my own employees or my own people. So let's talk a little bit about how consultants or product developers, developers at product companies, are looked at by their peers. Well, in the first 10 years of my career, again, when I did software development for product companies, my peers looked at me like family. I'm a member of the team. I sit there with them every day. I go to the same meetings everybody else does. I'm, getting the same benefits about as everybody else. I have pretty much the same influence and say. I'm susceptible to the same company policies. And usually people are just going to look at me as, I'm a member of the team. Now, as a consultant, you're not often looked at as a member of the family. And in fact, it's the opposite. You're looked at as an outsider or a third party. And so people can be very distrustful of a consultant. So one thing that I tell people is, if you're considering getting into software consulting, one of the things is you're going to have to be very comfortable with coming into a company where they're going to be looking at you with a lot of scrutiny and being a little bit skeptical and paranoid of you, at least at first. I had a really hard time with this, probably my first 2 or 3 years in software consulting. But after a while, it becomes one of those things, you just know it's part of the business. You know that, when you first get there, a big part of your job is to establish that trust, and it's fine. You see people treat you with skepticism, and it doesn't even faze you after a while. It's just part of the job. But it's something you need to consider if you really think it would be very difficult for you to have people be worried or concerned or paranoid about whether you can do, what they're asking you to do. That spotlight on you tends to be, at least in my experience, it's a little stronger as a software consultant. As a product developer, sure, you're going to go through an interview process, you're going to get on the job, people still don't know if you were a good hire, but again, that extra stress of a software consultant's usually being paid more because they're being looked at as, we hired this person as an outsider because they're an expert or a guru, I hate that term, but people love to use it, about some particular technology or process. That scrutiny is something that you just really are going to have to work at to get comfortable with if you want to get into consulting of software. So key traits. What are the things that really are really important from a skill standpoint if you're going to be a developer that works for a software company versus a consultant? Well, if you're working for a software company, typically, unfortunately, the main thing most companies look for is technical acumen. So we all know anybody who's went out there and tried to get a job through, the many job hiring sites that are out there. Most job positions, they have a section that talks about, communication and knowing Agile and, whatever process stuff people are looking for. But the bulk of the focus, especially by recruiters, you all know this, tends to be, do you know the technologies that we're using on this project? So when you go into a company as a software developer that works for a software company, it's really key that you have the right skills that they're looking for, at least when they bring you in. The other thing that usually companies look very strongly for in a hire that's going to work for the company as a permanent employee that's going to do software development is culture fit. And this is one of those things where I have a really hard time with it because, I've worked at companies where they look at culture fit as kind of how people communicate and treat each other. I've looked at other companies that honestly, in my opinion, culture fit is really just, are they as smart as we are? that's very subjective, and you're going to have to just kind of figure out on the job, or during the interview process rather, what their idea of culture fit is. And I've seen people, and I myself as well, have been rejected from jobs through an interview where people just say, oh, they weren't a culture fit, and they give you no other information than that. And it tends to kind of just be a catch-all for, there's just some reason that we're not comfortable communicating to you that we don't think you'd work out here. It's really unfortunate because, I look at the interview process as a time that if you're a company interviewing someone, this is your opportunity to really help them, even if they're not the right fit for you. But, so many companies are so worried about lawsuits and saying the wrong thing and discrimination that they tend to be very cold about the interview process. And it's just a reality. But, again, culture fit is something that I think is really going to be important when you're going to be a permanent hire, but it's up to you to kind of figure out, what does that even mean for that company? Now, as a software consultant, the key traits are very different. The first key trait I would say that's really important if you're going to do good as a software consultant is likability, meaning how much about your personality and how you interact with people and how you convey yourself is really likable, that people are going to enjoy working with you. This is really important because as a software consultant, you're often brought in, again, being paid by the business. They wouldn't pay for you if they didn't have to. And you need to get a job done or solve a problem as quickly as possible. And the only way you're going to do that is if the key people that you need to work with and interface with to be successful, because usually, again, as a software consultant, you're not a lone wolf. Even if you go in there by yourself, maybe you work for yourself and you don't even work for a consulting firm. Your ability to make good relationships work with the people that already work for that company is huge. And if you get good at this, you can build bridges with people and do things that nobody who works for that company can do. So likability is something you need to consider. Now, am I telling you to go out and dress a different way and change how you relate to people and, completely polish yourself in a different way? No, be yourself. But, at the same time, if the way that you interact with people tends to be in, a I know everything kind of attitude, or you talk down to people, you might start considering what kind of effect that has on people. And if you're going to go into software consulting, you probably can't continue those behaviors and really at least reach the success that you could have if you learn to be, professional, confident, but a little humble. And a little more appreciative of the people that are there, because they need to like you, to trust you, so you can actually do the work. And that brings me to the second point about that. That's a key trait, I think, if you're going to be a software consultant, and that is communication. You need to be excellent and above and beyond about communication. And when I say communication, I think a lot of people think PowerPoint presentations, written documentation, big videos they might make, the media that you use and being able to get in front of a bunch of people and, stand in front of a podium and talk about how you know everything. Sure, those are great skills. But really, when I talk about communication, it's more about clarity, meaning how clear can you be about what you're trying to get across, and also understanding your audience. Can you get in front of the CFO and help him or her understand, this is why we're going to budget differently while I'm here? Or can you get in front of the UX department, or if it's embedded UX, the people who are on the team that are doing design, and help them understand, this is why we're going to release more quickly, and we need you to actually, let's say, be helping us make design decisions embedded with our team, if that's the way you're going to work. Whatever that is, being able to talk with people and help them understand why the change that you need them to make, is important to the business, but it's also important to them. Really, really important. Okay, there we go. Giant wasps probably practically diving at my head again. I'm in Austin, so I can't always control the outdoor environment. And the third key trait, if you're going to be a consultant, and I think, all these traits I'm talking about, they're beneficial to both, but I think it's really beneficial, at least in my experience when I went into the consulting side, being good at the software business. So what do I mean by this? I mean, when you go into a company as a consultant, it's really important that you figure out how does their business model work at this company? What kind of effort do they have to put in to make money? And how do they actually collect revenue from their customers or their channels? And how do their software products play a part in generating that revenue? And who are all the people that are key decision makers that make that happen? And kind of what's some history of the business? So, as a software consultant, even though oftentimes I would be brought into a project to solve a problem, I wasn't very effective if I just showed up and tried to understand, okay, let me look at the technology of your existing product, let me look at the code, let me look at the infrastructure, let me look at your development process. That was all key. But if I just looked at that, then I really just kind of dropped into the organization and started doing work the way everybody else was. And oftentimes, the reason that there was a problem that existed that I was brought in for in the first place didn't have to do with technology. It instead had to do with culture or some way that the business and engineering were interfacing with each other that really was not working at that company. And the only way you're going to find those things out is by not just talking to the engineering side of the house. So I think as a consultant, if you're going to do this kind of work, or if you're going to move into the consulting side of software development for your career, being able to have, you don't have to be an expert at business. That's not really what I'm talking about. But having an appetite for it and an appreciation for it and an understanding of how necessary, understanding how each company's making its money, structured its organization, positioned its products in the market, how all the people work to produce that, at least at a fairly high level. That's really going to give you the vocabulary you need, the terms, the history. So when you get in meetings with people or you propose things, they don't look at it like, who's this person that we hired who's a consultant that has no idea how we even make money here? They're suggesting things that don't even make sense. No, you're going to be able to suggest things that are perfectly aligned with how things are looked at there. And so they're going to be accepted and people are going to be able to move on them much quicker. So let's talk about pay or benefits. As a software developer or a software architect or, an engineer at a software company, when you're an employee, it's typically you're making somewhere some number that's related to, market rate. There may be a rate that in your city, let's say, people tend to pay for someone with your title or experience. And the company you go to work for is usually going to pay you some range around that. Some companies pay a little higher, some pay a little lower. If you're doing remote work, some companies are willing to pay you the rate in the city you live in. Some are going to try to get you to accept a salary that's the market rate for wherever the headquarters is located. You kind of have to decide yourself how you feel about that and if that works. But usually your pay is somewhat limited to market rate. Now, again, at a startup or a company that's willing to offer you equity, you may have some shares or, some percentage of ownership of the company should it grow that, if you're there long enough for that to vest, you may get some money that way too. And there certainly have been some people who have made a lot of money that way. There's way more people who have not made anything from it, but it's a way to make money as a software developer at a company. Now, as a consultant, it depends a little bit on how you set up the contract when you get work with a client, but there's a couple different ways. One is, the most common way that customers tend to want to pay consulting firms is billing per hour. They want to look at, if I were to hire, let's say, a DevOps architect, if they brought you in for DevOps, what are typical consulting firms, asking or offering services per hour for someone with that skill set, and what are you asking? What do you want us to pay you? And doing some negotiating around hours. And if a company hires a consulting firm and they're going to hire, let's say, a whole team of 5 people to do something, sometimes the consulting firm will cut them a deal like, hey, you're paying for 5 of our people, we're going to charge you a little less since you're buying so many resources or so many people's time at it. So many people's effort at a time. That all kind of depends, but the other way, and especially it's easier to do this if you're an independent consultant, that you can also potentially make a lot more money than a software developer at a product company, or a consultant who's being paid per hour is, getting a percentage of the opportunity. So what does this mean? Well, if a company brings you in as a consultant and they're saying, we're looking at solving a problem that's going to generate, $3 million in cost savings for us in the first year and $2 million per year after that for the next 5 years. Well, shoot, that's like, around over $10 million for the total solution. If somebody comes to you and wants you to solve a problem for them that's worth to the business $10 million, it would be silly for you to negotiate around hourly rate when instead you can negotiate a percentage of that opportunity. If they're going to save $10 million if you solve the problem, you can ask them, yeah, I'm willing to do this for you for $500,000, and this will be done in the next 6 months. And if they understand the opportunity cost and what you're charging them, they have to make a decision. Now, they can go out and find somebody if they can find somebody to solve that problem for less, but I see many consultants that don't try this because they don't understand, look, a company, if they've got a huge upside to making a change and they can quantify that, and sometimes as a consultant, you need to help them quantify that. They don't even know how much they're going to save. But let's say you can help them get to that number, well then it's honest and it's fair to ask for a percentage of the opportunity you're enabling that company through your work, and not looking at it as you're going to pay me per hour, because you're not just doing a number of hours of work, that they're going to pay you the market rate. You're actually enabling them to have a huge profit or amount of extra revenue coming in, or cost savings, or whatever that is. So that's something you need to consider as far as your rewards if you're going to be a consultant. Is you may want to get better at negotiating and understanding, how does the work I'm doing enable a larger effort that's going to make money for that company, and how can I ask them for a reasonable piece of that opportunity? And it's going to take some negotiation and tweaking a little bit and kind of seeing how they feel. Negotiation is a huge thing, whether you're in sales, or you're in consulting or whatever. But again, I just want to encourage you to think about, if you do get into consulting of technology or software, there's the potential to make significantly more money. You just have to price and have your business model be set up to align with that different way of actually making money off of an engagement with a client. So growth. What are the differences in how you have potential to grow your skills depending on if you're a software developer for a software company versus a software consultant? Well, it depends a lot on the culture. However, I can give you my experience, which again is about 21 years. I'm not an expert at everything, but I feel like I've had, decent amount of time on both sides of the house. I can give you some, at least, feedback based on real experience. When you work for a software company, the skills that you improve are going to tend to be related to whatever skills are needed to build the product that you've been asked to build. So, that sounds amazingly obvious, but it's important to think about. If you go and work for a company and they're building their product in, let's say, Ruby on Rails, and you've got it in the back of your mind, I want to become a Node.js developer, and so I'm going to go work for this company, but eventually what I want to do is Node.js. Well, you're going to have to go to that company, probably prove yourself for a while, do the work in Ruby on Rails or whatever technology stack they're using, and then eventually convince them to allow you to do Node.js. If you want to learn Node.js in that environment, you're not really going to have the time to learn it on the job, at least at first, so you're really going to have to spend some time outside of working hours, improving your skills, learning Node, maybe building some sample projects or having some little side gigs or things that you do even in your spare time for fun to get fluent with that technology, should you want to do that as your full-time job. Now, as a consultant, it's often that, this depends a little bit, but if you work for like a firm, I worked for a firm for many years, oftentimes you may have a little teeny bit of experience in a technology and you're sold to a company, in an engagement, hey, Jamie, we'd like to have you go help this client with capacity testing in some environment. And oftentimes I would actually have to cram on a weekend, or there may be like a week that I have a lull between my prior client and when I'm about to start my new client. They call that being on the bench in consulting. You're basically not making any money for the consulting firm, but you're kind of re-upping your skills to get ready to start that new gig. So you actually, in my experience in consulting, you get a higher percentage of your time if you're working on shorter engagements to improve your skills, because in the 10 years that I've been doing consulting already so far, well, it's about 11 now, the amount of opportunities I've had to learn new technology were so much larger than when I worked for a product company. The amount of times I was asked to go into a client and help them solve a problem where I had never used that technology ever before, and I had to show up and be confident about it and talk fluently about it and be honest about the parts that I didn't know yet, but get up to speed really quick. It can be intimidating to some people, but to others it can be really exciting because, the first probably half of my career, I mostly did just .NET, or some Java too, and JavaScript and web programming and things like that. The second half of my career in consulting, I did business intelligence and mobile apps and master data management and enterprise service buses and service-oriented architecture and microservice. All this stuff, and it was never just like .NET. It was, .NET's this part and Java's this piece, and maybe they use Ruby for this. So, when I go into the market, often to find a new opportunity, I'm not really looking for a job that's like, we want a Ruby guru, we want a .NET guru. I tend to be more of I've got more hours spent probably working on web technology and mobile technology and things like this than anything else. But as a consultant, you're going to build up the skill set kind of like I have, where you really become an expert at how does technology enable different capabilities for a business, and how do I get up to speed quickly on all the patterns that are there to understand how they work and make really good decisions about how we're going to use the technology to help the business profit. And really, it's exciting, but it's much more challenging. You have to actually not rest on, I've spent the last 5 years of my career, or maybe 10 years of my career, becoming an expert at technology X, and so now I'm going to milk that for all I can. No, you might get done with a project if you're in consulting, and 2 weeks later you start a new one, and it has nothing to do with your prior technology. And so that just kind of sits on the back burner for a while you work on something new. So that's something just you should keep in mind, is if you're going to work for a software development company, there tends to be, and again, it's not true of all companies, a lot of this is very flexible, but it tends to be that your ability to learn new skills is really dependent on how well you're able to steer the company into changing the technologies that they're using or the processes, as well as how much time do you want to put in on top of your job to learn things yourself. As a consultant, really just the nature of the job, you're going to probably have many more opportunities to learn, but it can be higher pressure, and you have to be willing to accept that kind of an environment. So recognition. How do you get recognized for good work depending on these two, types of ways of producing software? Well, as a software developer, it tends to be that if a product that you worked on building is successful in the market, you can potentially get a lot of recognition and rewards for that. As a consultant, it's more often that same type of thing, if you help a problem get solved, then the client's going to be very happy with you and they're going to recognize you. However, if you're working for a firm, it's really the firm that has to recognize the good work and reward you. Again, I worked for a firm for about 10 years, and I would often go into a client and do amazing work for that client. The client would be thrilled with what I did, but because the firm that I worked for didn't really have an appreciation for everything I did, often I wasn't rewarded by my firm, equally for the level of effort or recognition that I got from the client. So one thing that you need to keep in mind if you do go the consulting route is, oftentimes, and this is something that I think is really important you should consider, your good work will not get recognition for you long term over your career. I've went into so many companies over the last 10 years and completely transformed the way they do some aspect of their software development, or they're delivering their product, and nobody even knows about it other than that company. Because I can't go out and say, hey, I helped company X and company Y and company Z when I work for a software consultancy firm, because it wasn't really me that helped the company, it was my firm. Now, if you're an independent consultant or you're the head of a software consulting firm, you can claim testimonials and things like that. But that's something you should consider. If you're thinking of being a software consultant, if you go into a firm where you're an employee of that firm, you may do amazing work for your clients, and they're going to know about it. And, hopefully with good karma and just the good work you put in, just like I've experienced here in Austin and, around other cities I've done work with remotely and things, you start to build up a good reputation. And if you ever need to get another job, or, you ever are looking for an opportunity, there's people out there that remember you. They remember what you did, and they remember how much you helped them, and they're going to want to support you. But if you're working for a firm, you may not get recognized, at least in the short term, for the amazing work that you're doing. So that's just something you need to consider. And the last thing I'll talk about is changing the way that people work or processes for software development. At a software development company, as an employee, if you've got a good reputation and you've done good work at the company for a while and people trust you, or you were brought in with a title to specifically do changes to the process, well, then you're really equipped. Now, you need to have the skill to pull it off, but you're really equipped with, as long as you know how to influence people, you know how to do it, you're willing to put the work in, you can change the way that people budget, plan, deliver, get feedback, how UX and QA and DevOps or ops are integrated. You can change all those things if you want to and you're willing to put the time in. If you're a software developer or a technology person working for the company that's building the software. If you're a consultant, however, it's often, at least in my experience, that you're kind of at the behest of the way that client develops software. Now, that's true if they develop software. If you instead get a client where, let's say, for example, their core business, they need software to do it, but the people that they employ, there's no software developers. They always outsource everything. Well, in that case, sure, as a consulting firm and you personally as someone who works for them or as an independent consultant, since you have complete control over how the software development process works, because that's not really a skill that the business that's hired you has, sure, you can influence that. But at least in my experience, oftentimes when I would be asked to go into a client and help them develop software, I had to use their time tracking system. I had to use their source control approach. I had to use their, idea of what agility and Scrum means, which was typically far from how I look at agility. But again, if you have high likability, you have a good track record, you know how to build bridges with people, all the things I talked about in the beginning of the video, you can change those things as a consultant. It's just going to take you a little bit longer. And at first, sometimes clients can look at it like, hey, I brought you in here just to solve a problem. Why are you trying to tell me how we work needs to change? And, if you're an effective communicator and you're really passionate about it, like I tend to be, you can get it done. It's just not as easy. But the upside is, if you get good at that, I found as a consultant, once I was able to help a client deliver software better in any way, all of a sudden, I got a lot of attention on me, and people were very willing to then bring me into higher level conversations where oftentimes I met with people that were way up in the company that, other people in the engineering side of the house would never even get to sit down and talk to. And I'd be sitting in meetings with them, pitching a whole bunch of stuff that I had already talked to the engineering team at the company about and I knew they wanted to do. So it wasn't like I was going behind their back, but I was helping them get their ideas to a larger audience. So, the summary of this just is, if you want recognition and stability and a pace where you kind of can adapt and, and learn new technologies in a little bit slower, I don't want to say slow, not at all, but a little bit more paced work style, software development at a software company, I think is going to work better for you. If you want to actually be able to branch outside of just the technology and be challenged with having to learn the business more, have the potential to make way more money if you learn to negotiate, how much money you're going to charge based on the opportunity cost, the percentage of what opportunity you're enabling for that company. And you also want to just be able to have much more influence at higher levels of the organization if you learn the right skills. Being a software consultant can be really exciting and lucrative. So if you like this video today, please give me a like below, give me a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and we'll talk to you next time. Thanks.